The morning sun shone over the tall glass mansion that stood proudly at the edge of the city. It belonged to Mr. Adrian Cole, one of the richest businessmen in the country. He had everything: money, fame, and power. But one thing he could never buy was his daughter's voice. His daughter, Mia, was born mute. From the day she entered the world, she had never spoken a word. Doctors tried everything. Therapists spent years working with her, but she remained silent. She was bright, kind, and full of emotion, but no one could hear her thoughts. Adrian loved her deeply, yet he felt helpless. Every time he looked at her, guilt filled his heart. He blamed himself, even though no one knew why Mia could not speak. Some said it was genetics, others said trauma before birth, but nothing was ever proven. Inside the mansion, life was quiet and cold. The staff moved around with strict discipline. No one dared to speak loudly or make mistakes. Adrian's rules were clear. Everything had to be perfect. Every room smelled of flowers. Every floor shined like a mirror, but despite all the beauty, the house lacked warmth. One morning, a new maid arrived. Her name was Grace. She was tall, dark-skinned, and carried herself with calm confidence. Unlike others who bowed nervously around Adrian, she seemed peaceful and respectful without fear. She came from a small village far away, and this job meant everything to her. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Dalton, didn't seem happy about the new maid. She watched Grace with cold eyes as she handed her a uniform. "Mr. Cole likes things done properly. Don't touch anything unless you are told. And never bother Miss Mia," she warned. Grace nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am." When Grace first saw Mia, she was in the garden, sitting alone under a tree. The girl looked around 12 or 13, wearing a soft blue dress. Her long brown hair was tied neatly, and a sketchbook rested on her lap. She drew flowers, trees, and birds with careful strokes. Grace paused for a moment, feeling something in her chest. There was sadness in Mia's eyes, but also a quiet strength. She walked closer and smiled. Mia noticed her, lifted her head slightly, and smiled back. A small but genuine smile. Grace knelt near her and pointed at the sketchbook. "You draw beautifully," she said softly. Mia tilted her head, unsure how to respond, then quickly wrote something on the corner of the page. "Thank you." Grace's eyes softened. "So you can write, that's good," Mia nodded. She wrote again. "Who are you?" "I'm Grace," the maid replied warmly. "I'm new here. I'll be helping around the house." Mia wrote one more word. "Welcome." Grace felt a strange connection then. Most people looked at Mia with pity or awkwardness, but Grace saw her differently. She saw intelligence behind those quiet eyes. Over the next few days, Grace noticed things about the mansion that others ignored. The staff never spoke kindly to each other. Everyone worked like machines. Even when Mia passed by, they would bow silently and keep walking. Grace thought it was strange. One evening, while cleaning Mia's room, Grace saw the girl standing by the window watching the rain. The room was filled with soft toys, books, and paintings, but Mia seemed lonely among them. Grace gently asked, "Do you like the rain?" Mia turned and smiled, then picked up her notebook. She wrote, "It's peaceful, but it makes me sad too." Grace sat on the floor beside her. "Why does it make you sad?" Mia paused before writing. "Because when it rains, I dream that I can talk, but when I wake up, I can't." Grace's heart ached. She wanted to comfort her, but didn't know how. So she simply said, "Maybe one day you will. Sometimes things change when we least expect them." Mia looked at her surprised. No one had ever said that to her before. Everyone else told her to accept her silence, but Grace spoke as if hope still existed. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She lay awake in the small servant's room, thinking about the girl. Something didn't feel right. Mia's eyes, her expressions, they weren't just silent. They looked frightened at times, as if she was hiding something. A few days later, Grace noticed a locked door at the end of the hall near Mia's room. When she asked Mrs. Dalton about it, the housekeeper frowned. "That's the old music room. No one goes in there. Mr. Cole ordered it locked years ago." "Why?" Grace asked. Mrs. Dalton glared. "You ask too many questions. Just do your work." Grace nodded and said no more, but her curiosity grew. That afternoon, she was polishing the stair railing when she heard something faint, like humming. It came from the direction of the locked room. She froze, listening closely. The sound was soft but real. A melody carried through the cracks of the door. Grace's eyes widened. "Music?" she whispered. But no one was supposed to use that room. She leaned closer, her heart pounding, but before she could do anything, Mrs. Dalton's sharp voice echoed down the hall. "Grace, what are you doing there?" Grace quickly stepped back. "Nothing, ma'am. I thought I heard something." Mrs. Dalton's eyes narrowed. "Stay away from that door." Grace nodded again, but she knew what she heard. Someone had been inside. That evening, she went to check on Mia again. The girl was sitting quietly, her sketchbook open, drawing a piano. Grace pointed at it and asked, "Do you like music?" Mia's hand froze for a moment, then she nodded slowly. She wrote, "I used to play, but Father stopped me." Grace frowned. "Why would he stop you?" Mia looked down and wrote, "He said it makes me sad." Grace didn't understand, but she didn't want to push her. She simply smiled and said, "Music can heal sadness too." For the first time, Mia looked straight into her eyes with a deep, almost fearful expression. She wrote quickly, "Please don't talk about music when Father is around. Promise me." Grace hesitated but nodded. "I promise." Days passed and Grace and Mia grew closer. They spent quiet afternoons together in the garden. Grace would tell stories about her village and Mia would listen, smiling silently. Sometimes Grace sang softly, and though Mia couldn't sing back, her eyes sparkled as if her soul understood the melody. But the mansion itself seemed to hold secrets. Grace often noticed how Adrian would avoid looking at Mia directly for too long. He loved her, yes, but whenever she smiled at him, something dark flickered behind his eyes. Guilt or pain, Grace couldn't tell. One evening, Grace was walking down the hall when she saw Adrian standing outside the locked music room. His hand rested on the door handle, trembling slightly. He stood there for a moment, then turned away quickly and walked off. After he left, Grace moved closer. She placed her ear against the door again. This time she heard it clearly, a faint hum like a young girl's voice. Her heart jumped. It sounded like Mia, but that was impossible. Mia couldn't speak. Grace pulled away, confused. She looked toward Mia's room, where the girl was quietly painting by herself. The sound continued from behind the locked door. Her mind raced. If Mia is there, then who is in this room? And if she's not, then how can her voice be here? That night, as the mansion fell silent and everyone slept, Grace sat by the window of her small room, staring at the rain again. She whispered to herself, "Something is not right in this house." In the darkness, thunder rolled across the sky, and lightning flashed for a moment, lighting up the halls through the window. Grace saw a shadow move, someone standing near the locked room again. She grabbed her candle and stepped out quietly. The corridor was cold and silent. When she reached the end of the hall, the door to the music room was slightly open. Grace's breath caught. She slowly pushed it wider, the hinges creaking softly. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old memories. A piano stood in the center, covered with a white sheet. She lifted the candle higher and froze. On the piano bench sat Mia. Her back was to Grace, her fingers hovering above the keys. And then Grace heard it again, a soft humming, low and beautiful, escaping from Mia's lips. Grace felt her heart stop. Mia was singing. The girl who had never spoken a word in her life was singing in the dark. Grace's hand trembled, the candle flame flickering wildly. She didn't move or speak. Mia turned slowly, her eyes wide with fear and surprise, as if caught doing something forbidden. The two stared at each other, frozen between truth and secret. Grace whispered, "Mia, you can speak?" Mia's lips parted and a single word slipped out, trembling and broken. "Please, don't tell." Grace stood frozen, her heart beating fast. The candle in her hand shook as she watched the girl sitting by the piano. Mia's lips moved again, but no sound came this time. She looked scared, almost guilty. Grace stepped closer slowly. "Mia, you can talk? You can sing?" She whispered again, afraid someone might hear. Mia quickly shook her head and placed her finger on her lips, signaling her to stay quiet. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered weakly, "Please don't tell anyone." Grace stared at her in disbelief. For years, everyone believed this girl was mute, that she had never spoken a single word, but here she was talking. Not just talking, singing. Grace couldn't understand. She walked closer and knelt beside her. "Mia, how long have you been able to do this?" she asked softly. Mia looked down, her small hands trembling. "A long time," she whispered. "But Papa must never know," Grace frowned. "Why?" "He loves you, Mia. He would be happy." Mia shook her head quickly, her eyes wide with fear. He said, "Bad things happen when I talk. Please, you can't tell him." Grace was confused and hurt. She wanted to comfort the girl, but also needed to understand. "Who told you that? Your father?" Mia didn't answer. She looked away, her lips pressed tight. Grace placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You can trust me, Mia. I won't tell anyone, but I need to understand." "Why would your father say something like that?" Mia's eyes filled with tears. "Because of Mama," she whispered. The candlelight flickered across her face, showing the sadness in her eyes. Grace waited, letting the silence fill the space until Mia continued. "When I was little," Mia said softly, "Mama used to sing to me every night. She had a beautiful voice. I wanted to sing like her. One night I tried to sing for Papa, but Mama fell sick the same night. She never woke up," Papa said. "It was my voice that took her away." Grace's eyes widened. "Mia, no. That can't be true." Mia hugged herself tightly. "He was so sad. He said I should never try to speak again or bad things would happen. So I stopped. I didn't want anyone to get hurt." Grace's heart broke for her. This child had been carrying fear and guilt all her life for something that wasn't her fault. She reached out and wiped Mia's tears gently. "Sweetheart, your voice didn't hurt your mother. It was just a sad time. It wasn't you." But Mia only shook her head again. "You don't know Papa. When he gets angry, he breaks things. He gets scared when I try to talk. So please, Grace, don't tell him. Promise me." Grace nodded slowly, even though her heart was uneasy. "I promise." Mia smiled faintly, her tears still glistening. Then she whispered, "You're the only one who knows." Grace touched her hand. "Then I'll help you. You shouldn't be afraid of your own voice." For the next few days, Grace pretended everything was normal, but her mind couldn't stop thinking about that night. She had seen the truth. Mia wasn't mute by birth. She had been silenced by fear. Grace wanted to help, but she had to be careful. Mr. Cole was strict and private. If he found out she had entered the locked music room, she could lose her job or worse. That morning, while cleaning the dining room, Grace overheard a conversation between Mr. Cole and Mrs. Dalton. "Make sure Mia doesn't go near that old room again," Adrian said sternly. "I don't want her around those things." "Yes, sir," Mrs. Dalton replied quickly. "She spends more time with that new maid." "Should I separate them?" Grace paused behind the wall, holding her breath. "No," Adrian said after a moment. "If the maid keeps her quiet, let her stay. I just don't want to hear about music or singing ever again." Grace's chest tightened. His voice carried pain, but also something darker, fear mixed with guilt. That night, after everyone slept, Grace quietly entered Mia's room. The little girl was sitting by the window again, looking at the moon. She turned when she saw Grace and smiled softly. Grace sat beside her and whispered, "You miss your mother, don't you?" Mia nodded slowly. "Every day. Do you remember her well?" "Yes," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She was kind and gentle. She used to play the piano. The music room was her favorite place." Grace looked around the room and noticed a small locket hanging by the bed. She picked it up gently. Inside was a tiny picture of a woman with kind eyes and long golden hair. "She's beautiful," Grace said. Mia smiled. She sang like the birds. Papa used to love listening to her. But after she was gone, he locked all the instruments. He never wanted music in the house again. Grace sighed deeply. She could understand the pain of loss, but blaming a child for it was cruel. The next day, while serving tea in the study, Grace dared to speak to Adrian directly for the first time. "Sir," she said politely, "Miss Mia is a wonderful girl. You must be proud." Adrian looked up from his papers and gave a small nod. "Yes, I am. She's all I have left." Grace hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever talk about her mother with her?" He froze for a second, then placed his pen down. "That subject is closed," he said coldly. "I understand, sir," Grace replied softly, "but maybe speaking of her mother might help her heal." Adrian's eyes darkened. "No one talks about her. Do you understand?" "Not in this house," Grace bowed her head. "Yes, sir." She left quietly, her heart pounding. She could feel that something deeper was buried in this house, something that kept everyone silent. Later that evening, Grace found Mia again in the garden. The girl looked peaceful, watching the sunset. Grace sat beside her and whispered, "Would you like to sing again?" Mia looked nervous. What if someone hears? They won't, Grace said gently. I'll watch. Mia hesitated, then closed her eyes. Her lips parted and a soft tune came out, gentle, pure, and full of emotion. It was the same melody Grace had heard through the door that night. It was beautiful. When Mia finished, she looked at Grace shyly. Was it bad? Grace smiled, tears in her eyes. It was the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. Mia smiled too, a real smile this time, but their moment didn't last. Suddenly, the sharp sound of footsteps echoed from behind them. Grace turned and froze. Adrian stood at the edge of the garden, staring at them with a cold, shocked expression. Mia's face turned pale. She dropped her hands and tried to hide behind Grace. Adrian's voice was low but trembling. What was that sound? Grace quickly stood up. Sir, was that her voice? He interrupted, his eyes wide with fear. Mia started shaking. Papa, Stop, he said sharply, stepping closer. You promised never to speak. You promised. Mia burst into tears. I'm sorry, Papa, I didn't mean. Grace stepped between them. Sir, please. She didn't do anything wrong. She just sang a little. Enough, Adrian shouted, his voice echoing through the garden. You don't understand. You don't know what her voice can do. Grace was stunned. Her voice can't do anything wrong. She's just a child. Adrian's hands trembled as he turned away, breathing heavily. You weren't here the night her mother died. You didn't see it? Grace looked confused. What do you mean? Adrian didn't answer. He just whispered, almost to himself. She sang that night. And the next morning, her mother was gone. The doctor said it was sudden, but I know what I heard. Mia was crying silently now, covering her ears. Papa, please stop. Adrian's voice broke. I can't lose you too. He turned and walked back into the mansion, leaving both of them standing in the garden, the evening wind cold and heavy around them. Grace knelt beside Mia and held her tightly. It's okay, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. But Mia sobbed into her arms. He hates my voice. No, Grace whispered, he's just afraid. Something happened that he can't explain. But I promise you we'll find the truth. I'll help you. That night, Grace made a decision. She would uncover what really happened to Mia's mother. Something about Adrian's words didn't make sense. A man of his power and knowledge couldn't believe that a child's song caused death, unless something else was hidden behind it. The next morning, Grace began her search quietly. While cleaning the library, she found an old photo album hidden behind a stack of books. Inside were pictures of Adrian, his wife, and little Mia as a baby. They looked happy. One photo caught her eye. It was of Adrian's wife sitting at the piano, a strange symbol carved into the wood behind her. Grace frowned. She had seen that symbol before. It was carved faintly on the side of the locked music room's door. Her heart started racing. She closed the book quickly when she heard footsteps. Mrs. Dalton entered, giving her a sharp look. You seem very interested in old things, don't you? Grace smiled politely. Just cleaning, ma'am. Good, Mrs. Dalton said coldly. And keep your nose out of things that don't concern you. After she left, Grace whispered to herself, something in this house connects to that night. Later that evening, she went to see Mia again. Mia, do you remember anything strange about the night your mother died? Mia looked down. Only the song, she said softly. I sang it because Mama taught it to me. Then she smiled and went to sleep. In the morning, she didn't wake up. Grace's eyes softened. Do you remember the song? Mia nodded. Yes. Can you hum it for me? Mia hesitated, then slowly hummed the tune. It was the same gentle melody as before. But as Grace listened carefully, she noticed something strange. The air around them felt heavy, and the small candle flickered as if reacting to the sound. When Mia stopped, everything went still again. Grace sat frozen. What was that? She whispered. Mia looked frightened. That always happens. That's why Papa is scared. The next morning, the mansion was unusually quiet. The servants whispered among themselves, avoiding Grace as she moved through the hallways. Everyone had seen what happened in the garden the night before. Mr. Cole shouting, Mia crying, and Grace standing between them. Word spread quickly, and though no one dared to speak loudly, the eyes of the staff followed Grace everywhere she went. Grace didn't care about the gossip. Her heart was heavy with worry for Mia. The girl had locked herself in her room since the night before, refusing to eat or talk. Grace went to her door and knocked softly. Mia, it's me, Grace. Please open the door. No reply. She waited, listening closely. Then she heard faint footsteps inside, followed by the click of the lock. The door opened slowly and Mia appeared, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. Grace knelt down and held her hand gently. I was worried about you. Mia shook her head. Papa didn't talk to me this morning. He looked at me like I did something terrible. Grace brushed a strand of hair from her face. He's confused, Mia. He doesn't understand what happened. I shouldn't have sung, Mia said, her voice trembling. I made him remember Mama. That's why he's angry. Grace sighed softly. You didn't do anything wrong. You loved your mother and she loved you. Your voice is not a curse, no matter what anyone says. Mia looked up at her, her eyes full of pain. Then why does strange air move when I sing? You saw it. The candle moved. Grace didn't have an answer. She had seen it with her own eyes. The air had changed when Mia sang, like the sound itself carried power. But that was impossible, at least it should have been. She smiled gently, hiding her worry. Maybe it's just the wind, or maybe your mother's love is still around, listening. Mia managed a small smile and Grace felt relief wash over her. Later that day, Grace went back to her cleaning duties, but her mind was elsewhere. She needed to know what really happened to Mia's mother, and what was behind that symbol she had seen on the piano in the door. That evening, while others were in the servants' quarters having dinner, Grace slipped quietly toward the old music room. She held a small lantern in her hand and stopped in front of the carved symbol on the wooden door. It looked like a circle with 3 curved lines crossing it, almost like waves or sound marks. She traced her fingers over it. The wood felt warm, as if it had life of its own. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The air inside was still, heavy with dust. The piano stood in the middle, covered by its white sheet. Moonlight fell through the window, touching the edge of the instrument. Grace pulled the cover off slowly. The piano keys gleamed faintly, though no one had touched them in years. She noticed something strange. Words carved on the wood above the keys. They were small, almost hidden under the layer of dust. She bent closer and whispered the letters out loud. For the voice that heals and the song that binds. She frowned, not understanding. Suddenly, a cold breeze passed through the room, and one of the piano keys pressed down by itself, making a faint sound. Grace jumped, her lantern trembling in her hand. She looked around quickly, but no one was there. The air grew colder. Then she heard a whisper, soft and distant, like a woman's voice calling gently. Mia. Grace's heart froze. The voice was full of love and sorrow. She whispered, Who's there? No answer. Only the faint echo of the piano string fading away. Grace quickly stepped back and left the room, her heart pounding. When she reached the corridor, she stopped to breathe. Something inside that room was alive or trapped. The next morning, Grace decided to speak with Adrian again. She found him in his study, sitting by the large window, staring at an old photo of his late wife. Sir, she said softly. He looked up, his expression tired. What is it? I know you don't want to talk about your wife, but I think you need to. For Mia's sake, his eyes hardened. You are crossing the line, Grace. Please, sir, she said calmly. She's afraid. She thinks her voice is cursed. That's not right for a child. You know that. Adrian stood up suddenly, his voice sharp. You don't understand. You weren't there that night. Then tell me, Grace said firmly. Let me understand. Adrian turned away, gripping the edge of his desk. His shoulders trembled slightly. It was a stormy night, he said finally. Mia was 5. My wife, Clara, was teaching her a song on the piano. They were laughing, singing together. I was working in the other room when I heard a strange sound, like the house itself was shaking. When I ran in, the chandelier above the piano had fallen. Clara was beneath it. He stopped, his voice breaking. Mia was standing there, still singing. The piano keys were moving on their own. She looked at me and asked, Papa, why won't Mama wake up? Grace felt a chill run down her spine. That was an accident, sir. A storm can shake things. Adrian shook his head slowly. No, I heard it. Her voice changed the air. I felt it. It was like the sound came alive. He turned toward her, his eyes full of fear. I buried the piano in that room and locked it away. I couldn't destroy it. It was Clara's favorite. But I made sure Mia never sang again. Grace took a deep breath. You wanted to protect her, but instead you've made her live in fear. That child has carried guilt for something that wasn't her fault. Adrian's face softened, but pain still clouded his eyes. You think I don't know that? Every day I see her mother in her face. Every night I hear that song in my head. Grace looked at him kindly. Then maybe it's time to stop being afraid and find out what really happened. The truth doesn't hide forever. Adrian didn't answer. He just sat back in his chair, his hands trembling slightly. Grace bowed and quietly left the room. That night, Mia couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the strange words Grace told her, that her voice might not be a curse. She sat up and looked at her mother's locket again. Inside it was a small button she had never noticed before. She pressed it and a tiny note folded inside dropped out. Her eyes widened. She unfolded the paper carefully. It was written in her mother's handwriting. My little songbird, if you ever sing again, remember this. Your voice carries love, not sorrow. Never fear what you were born to share. Mia clutched the note tightly, her heart beating fast. The next morning, she ran to find Grace. She found her in the kitchen, washing dishes. Grace, she whispered, holding out the paper. Look what I found. Grace dried her hands and took the note gently. As she read it, her eyes filled with tears. This means your mother wanted you to sing, Mia. She never blamed you. Mia smiled for the first time in days. Then why does Papa still think my voice is dangerous? Grace shook her head. Because he doesn't know the full truth. I think your mother's death was not caused by your song. Something else happened that night. Mia frowned. What do you mean? Grace looked serious. I went into the music room again. There's something strange there. Symbols, carvings, words about a voice that heals and binds. It's not normal. I think your mother knew about it. Mia's eyes widened. You went inside? Yes, and I heard something, a woman's voice calling your name. Mia froze. Mama, Grace nodded slowly. It sounded like her. Mia's small hand trembled. I want to see the room, Grace hesitated. Your father, I don't care, Mia said firmly. I want to know. That night, when everyone was asleep, Grace took Mia's hand and together they walked quietly through the dark corridor. The house creaked softly under their feet. They stopped at the music room door. Grace pushed it open, the old hinges groaning softly. The air inside was cold. Mia looked around in awe. It's just like I remember, she whispered. Grace guided her closer to the piano. The moonlight from the window fell directly on it, making the carved symbol glow faintly. Mia reached out and touched the keys gently. Mama used to play this song, she said softly. Then she began to hum, the same tune as before. The air in the room shifted again. The candle flame flickered wildly. Grace held her breath. Then the piano keys began to move by themselves, playing along with her hum. Grace gasped. Mia, stop. But Mia shook her head. No, I can feel her. Mama is here. A soft golden light began to appear above the piano, faint and shimmering. Grace stared in disbelief. The light slowly formed into the faint outline of a woman. It was Clara. Her face was calm, her eyes full of love. Mama, Mia whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. Grace fell to her knees, speechless. The spirit smiled gently. My little one, she said softly, her voice like a breeze. Don't be afraid of your gift, Mia sobbed. Papa said my voice hurt you. Clara shook her head. No, my darling. It was never you. There was a storm. The house shook and I tried to save you. It was an accident. Your voice saved me that night. It carried my heart to peace. Grace's tears fell silently. Mama, what should I do? Mia whispered. Sing, my love, Clara said softly. Sing without fear. Your song can heal your father's heart. The light faded slowly, leaving the room still and quiet again. Mia stood there, trembling but peaceful. Grace rose slowly and hugged her. She loves you so much. Mia smiled weakly. I know now. But outside the door, someone had seen everything. Adrian stood in the shadows, frozen, his eyes filled with shock and disbelief. He had followed them quietly, afraid something might happen. But what he saw changed everything he believed. He whispered to himself, Clara. The morning light poured through the tall windows of the mansion, painting golden patterns across the marble floor. The house was strangely silent. Usually the sound of footsteps, whispers, or the clatter of breakfast trays filled the halls. But today the mansion seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. Mira stood outside Alina's door with a tray in her hands. Her heart beat fast and her fingers trembled slightly. She had been having strange dreams again. Dreams where she heard Alina's voice calling her name. Every time she woke up, she thought it was just her imagination, but the feeling never left her. Something deep inside told her that the girl was ready to speak, but fear was stopping her. She knocked gently. "Alina, breakfast," she said softly. The door opened slowly. Alina stood there in her white nightdress, her golden hair falling loosely over her shoulders. Her eyes looked tired, but there was something new in them, a spark that hadn't been there before. She stepped aside to let Mira in. Mira placed the tray on the small table near the window. "You didn't eat much last night," she said kindly. "Try a little today." Alina nodded and sat down. She picked up a spoon but didn't eat right away. Instead, she stared at the sunlight falling on the table, lost in thought. Mira could see that she wanted to say something but didn't know how. Mira sat beside her. "You know, Alina," she said gently, "sometimes silence speaks louder than words. But sometimes, the truth can only come out when you speak." Alina turned her head slowly. Her eyes met Mira's, full of confusion and fear. She pointed to her throat and shook her head, the way she always did to say she couldn't speak. Mira smiled softly. "Maybe you couldn't before," she said, "but maybe now you can." Alina frowned, unsure what she meant. Mira took her hand and held it tightly. "I believe there's something stopping you," she whispered. "Not your body, but your heart." Tears formed in Alina's eyes. She looked away, her lips trembling. Her heart was heavy with something she couldn't explain, an image, a sound, a moment she could never forget. Every time she tried to remember, it felt like someone was pressing down on her chest. Mira didn't push her. She knew healing took time. Instead, she started telling a small story about a little bird that lost its song. "There was once a bird," Mira said softly, "who forgot how to sing. Every day it tried, but no sound came out. The other birds laughed at it, so it stopped trying. One day it met a kind wind that whispered, 'Your song is not gone. It's just hiding in your fear.' The bird listened, took a deep breath, and tried one more time. And when it did, the sweetest song came out." Alina's fingers tightened around Mira's hand. Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't know why, but the story felt like it was about her. Mira smiled gently. "Maybe you're like that bird," she said. "Your voice is not gone, Alina. It's just waiting for you to believe in it again." Alina's lips parted slightly. Her chest rose and fell as if something inside her wanted to break free. But before she could try, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Mr. Hale entered the room with his usual calm expression, though his eyes showed worry. "Good morning," he said softly. He looked at Mira, then at his daughter. "How are you both today?" Alina turned toward him, her hands folded in her lap. She gave a small nod. "She's doing better," Mira replied. "She ate a little last night and she's listening more." Mr. Hale nodded approvingly. "That's good." Then his tone softened. "Alina, sweetheart, Dr. Lewis will be here this evening. Just for a checkup. Nothing to worry about." At the mention of Dr. Lewis, Alina froze. Her body tensed and her eyes darkened with fear. She shook her head quickly, backing away. Mira noticed immediately. "Sir, maybe—" Mr. Hale sighed. "I know she doesn't like him, but he's been her doctor since she was born. He only wants to help." Alina's breathing grew faster. She reached out, gripping Mira's arm tightly, shaking her head again. Mira looked at her in surprise. Something about that reaction didn't feel right. Why would a girl be so afraid of a doctor she had known all her life? There was something deeper here, something that hadn't been told. That night when the doctor arrived, Alina hid behind Mira. Dr. Lewis was a tall man with silver hair and a gentle voice. He smiled politely, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "How is our little angel today?" he said, bending down slightly to look at Alina. "Still quiet, I see." Alina didn't move. Her eyes were wide, her body shaking. Mira frowned. "Maybe you should give her some space," she said politely but firmly. Dr. Lewis straightened up and chuckled. "She's fine. I've seen this before. Trauma like hers doesn't go away easily." He placed a hand on Alina's shoulder, but she flinched and pushed his hand away, her breathing quick and uneven. Mr. Hale looked worried. "Is something wrong?" Dr. Lewis smiled. "Just nerves. She's sensitive." He gave Mira a cold glance as if blaming her for interfering. That night, Alina couldn't sleep. The shadows in her room seemed to move, and the memory of Dr. Lewis's face made her heart pound. She clutched her blanket tightly, her eyes filling with tears. Mira, sleeping in the next room, woke up when she heard a soft cry. She ran to Alina's room and found her curled up on the bed, trembling. "Alina," she whispered, sitting beside her. "It's okay. You're safe. I'm here." Alina opened her mouth, trying to speak. A faint sound came out, a broken whisper. It wasn't clear, but Mira heard it. It was the sound of her name. Mira gasped softly. "Did you just—" Alina's eyes widened. She touched her throat in shock. Her lips moved again, and a faint whisper escaped. Mira." It was weak, but it was real. Mira felt tears in her eyes. "You spoke," she said softly. "You spoke, Alina." Alina's face lit up with disbelief and relief. She tried again, this time a little louder. "Mira." Mira hugged her tightly. "See? I told you your voice was just hiding." For the first time in years, Alina smiled, a real bright smile that reached her eyes. But as joy filled the room, another feeling followed, fear. Because if she could speak, it meant the secret she had been forced to keep could finally come out. The next morning, Mira told Mr. Hale what happened. He was stunned. His eyes filled with tears as he hugged his daughter tightly. "My little girl," he whispered. "You did it." But when Mira mentioned how Alina reacted to Dr. Lewis, Mr. Hale's face darkened. "She's always been nervous around him," he said quietly. "He was there when her mother passed. Maybe it reminds her of that." Mira nodded, though she wasn't convinced. She had seen real terror in the girl's eyes, not just sadness. That afternoon, Alina tried to speak again, forming simple words. Her voice was soft and shaky, but it was progress. Mira encouraged her every step of the way. They laughed, they practiced, and the silence that once ruled the mansion slowly began to fade. But that night, Mira heard something strange. As she walked past Alina's room, she heard whispering. She pushed the door open slightly and saw Alina sitting on her bed, whispering to herself. Her voice was clearer now, though full of pain. "He said not to tell, or he'll hurt Papa." Mira's heart stopped. She stepped inside slowly. "Alina," she whispered. "Who said that?" Alina froze. Her eyes filled with tears. She shook her head and covered her mouth. Mira knelt beside her. "It's okay," she said softly. "You can tell me. You're safe now." Alina's lips trembled. She whispered one word, one that sent chills down Mira's spine. "Lewis." Mira felt her heart race. Everything started making sense, the fear, the silence, the doctor's strange behavior. She hugged Alina tightly. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," she said firmly. "I'll protect you." Outside the window, thunder rolled across the sky and rain began to fall. Inside the mansion, two hearts finally began to speak the truth that had been buried for years. But Mira knew this was just the beginning, and the truth they were about to uncover could change everything. The rain had not stopped all night. The sound of water hitting the windows echoed through the grand halls of the Hale mansion. Mira sat by Alina's bed, her mind restless. The young girl had fallen asleep, her face pale but peaceful. For the first time she had spoken, and what she said had changed everything. Mira couldn't stop hearing that name. Lewis. The doctor who had been with the family for years, who Mr. Hale trusted completely. How could he be part of something so terrible? Mira's chest tightened. She had to find out the truth, no matter what it cost. Early the next morning, Mira went down to the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the sound of rain. Mrs. Greta, the head maid, looked up from the stove when she entered. "You didn't sleep?" she asked kindly. Mira shook her head. "No, I was with Alina." Mrs. Greta nodded with a soft smile. "You've done wonders for that child." "I've never seen her smile like she did yesterday." Mira smiled faintly. "She's strong. Stronger than anyone thinks." She wanted to ask more about the doctor, but she knew it wasn't safe yet. So she quietly made tea, her mind working fast. She had to be careful. If Dr. Lewis found out that Alina spoke and remembered something, he might try to stop them before they could reveal it. Later that morning, Mr. Hale came down the stairs, looking tired but calm. "Mira," he said softly, "I don't know how to thank you. My daughter spoke. After all these years." His voice trembled. "You don't have to thank me, sir," Mira said with a gentle smile. She found her own courage. Mr. Hale smiled sadly. "I still can't believe it. Maybe Dr. Lewis was right after all." At that name, Mira froze. "Sir, can I ask something?" Of course. How long has Dr. Lewis been with your family? Mr. Hale frowned. Since before Alina was born. He was my wife's doctor, too. He's practically family. Mira hesitated. Did Alina's mother die in the hospital? Mr. Hale's face darkened. Yes, it was unexpected. Complications after birth. Lewis did everything he could, but he looked away. Mira nodded slowly. Her heart ached for him, but her instincts told her something was wrong. She had seen too much fear in Alina's eyes when she said the doctor's name. That afternoon, Alina woke up. She looked stronger, her blue eyes clear. When she saw Mira, she gave a weak smile. Good morning, Mira said softly. Good, Alina whispered, her voice quiet but steady. Mira's heart filled with pride. You're doing so well. Would you like to draw again today? Alina nodded, then pointed toward the window. Rain. Mira laughed softly. Yes, it's raining. Maybe it's washing away the sadness. Alina looked out the window and whispered something. Mira leaned closer to hear. Dream, she said softly. I saw Mama. Mira froze. You saw your mother? Alina nodded. She said, Tell him. Truth. Mira's breath caught. She felt goosebumps on her arms. Tell who the truth? Alina looked up, her eyes full of fear. Papa. Before Mira could ask more, the door opened. Dr. Lewis entered, holding his medical bag. Well, he said with a polite smile. Look who's awake. Alina instantly moved closer to Mira, her small hands gripping her arm. Mira placed a protective hand over hers. Doctor, Mira said carefully. She's doing better. She even spoke yesterday. Dr. Lewis's smile faded for a second, then returned. Spoke? He repeated. Are you sure? Yes, Mira said firmly. She's improving fast. He looked at Alina, who stared at the floor. That's surprising, he said slowly. After so many years, her voice returns now. Mira noticed how his tone wasn't happy. It was sharp, almost suspicious. She's stronger than anyone thought. Mira replied calmly. Dr. Lewis stepped closer, his eyes cold. Children like her should rest. Too much excitement can bring back their trauma. She's fine, Mira said quickly. She needs love and safety, not more fear. He gave her a long look, then turned to Mr. Hale, who had just entered. Charles, we should keep a close watch. Sudden improvements can be unstable. Mr. Hale nodded slowly, trusting his words as always. Of course. As soon as the doctor left, Mira exhaled shakily. Alina was still trembling. Mira hugged her. It's okay, she whispered. He won't hurt you. I promise. That night Mira couldn't sleep again. The rain had stopped, but the air felt heavy. She walked quietly through the halls, thinking. She had to prove that Dr. Lewis had done something, not just to scare Alina, but something worse. She went to the old library. The Hale family kept records there. Letters, papers, even old reports. She searched the shelves until she found a locked cabinet marked medical records. She looked around. The key wasn't there, but she remembered Mr. Hale kept duplicates in his study drawer. Carefully, she went there and found a small silver key. Her hands trembled as she returned to the cabinet and opened it. Inside were folders, some new, some yellow with age. She found one with Alina's name. When she opened it, her heart sank. There were notes signed by Dr. Lewis, reports of Alina's treatment, her condition, and recommendations for medication that caused sleepiness and memory loss. Mira frowned. Why would a child need such strong medicine? Then she found another file, Mrs. Hale's medical report. Her eyes moved over the pages and her hands froze. The final report said cause of death, internal bleeding after an injection reaction. The signature at the bottom was Dr. Lewis. Mira's chest tightened. There was a second handwritten note attached, not from the doctor, but from a nurse. It read, she was awake before she died. She said he did this. Mira gasped softly. Her hand shook as she closed the folder. It was enough. Dr. Lewis had done something to both mother and daughter. Mira, she turned quickly. Mr. Hale was standing at the door, half asleep, his eyes confused. What are you doing here? He asked quietly. Mira swallowed hard. Sir, you need to see this. She handed him the papers. He frowned and read through them. His eyes widened. This can't be true, he whispered. Lewis has been my friend for 20 years. I'm sorry, sir, Mira said softly. But he hurt your wife. And I think he hurt Alina too. That's why she was afraid to speak. That's why she stayed silent. Mr. Hale looked shaken. I don't know what to think. Just then a small voice came from behind them. Papa. They turned. Alina stood in the doorway, her eyes shining with tears. He hurt Mama. Mr. Hale dropped the papers, his body frozen. What? Alina walked closer, trembling. He said, if I tell, he will hurt you too. Her voice was soft but clear, every word breaking years of silence. Mr. Hale knelt and held her tight. No one will ever hurt you again, he said firmly, tears streaming down his face. The door suddenly opened. Dr. Lewis stood there, his face pale and cold. I see you've been busy, he said quietly. Those papers were not meant to be found. Mr. Hale stood up, his voice hard. Is it true? Did you hurt my wife? Dr. Lewis didn't answer. His silence was enough. Mira stepped between him and Alina. You can't scare her anymore, she said bravely. For a long moment the room was silent except for the ticking clock. Then Mr. Hale spoke. Get out, he said coldly. And don't ever come near my family again. Dr. Lewis's expression darkened, but he said nothing. He turned and left, his footsteps echoing down the hall. The police came later that night. The evidence Mira found was enough for them to open an investigation. Dr. Lewis was taken away, and the truth finally began to come out. About his experiments, his lies, and the way he had controlled the family for years. When it was over, the mansion felt different. The silence was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. Days later, Alina sat in the garden with Mira, watching butterflies fly above the flowers. Her voice was still weak, but she could speak now. Slowly, softly, with growing confidence. Do you think Mama is happy now? She asked. Mira smiled warmly. Yes, Alina, she's very proud of you. Alina looked up at the blue sky and smiled. I'm not afraid anymore. Mr. Hale came out carrying a small book. What are my two angels talking about? Alina laughed softly. About Mama. He knelt beside her. She would be proud. You found your voice, my brave girl. Mira looked at them and felt peace in her heart. She had come to this house as a maid, but she had become part of something bigger, a family that learned how to speak the truth after years of silence. As the sun set behind the garden, Alina turned to Mira and whispered, Thank you. Mira smiled, her eyes shining. You don't need to thank me, little one. You saved yourself. The wind blew gently through the trees, carrying away the last shadow of fear. The mansion, once silent and cold, now echoed with laughter, words, and love, proof that truth and courage could heal even the deepest wounds. And for the first time, Alina's voice filled the air, clear, strong, and free.